It's the most magical time of the year, and I'm not talking about Christmas. I'm talking about the NFL season. So make sure you're ready with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV. Get the most live NFL games all in one place. Right now, you can save $85 when you bundle NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube TV. Sign up today at youtubetv.com/Spotify. Device and content restrictions apply. Discount applied to first 4 months of YouTube TV, then $72.99 a month. Ends August 29th. Terms, restrictions, and embargoes apply. No refunds.
School is back, and Dick's Sporting Goods has what you need to win your year. We've got everything from cleats to sambas, dunks, and more. Plus, the hottest looks from Nike, Jordan, and Adidas. Find your first day fits in-store or online at dicks.com.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year and plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
Hi, everyone, and welcome on into a brand new edition of Eye on the Enemy, part of the Eagles Pin Pull Network. I'm your host, John Stolnis, and of course, this is the podcast that keeps an eye on all of the Eagles' enemies. Usually during the regular season, week by week, I'll be talking to someone who covers whatever team it is the Eagles happen to be playing that week. But here in the preseason, we're still just getting feelers from those folks who cover the team, both locally and on a national level. And joining me coming up here in just a couple of minutes, Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports. He covers the Eagles and the NFL. He's been covering the league for a number of years. Good friend of the podcast, so he's going to join us to talk about the Jahan Dotson trade. He's going to talk to us about his thoughts on training camp, and then we're going to give out our own power rankings of the NFC, the top 7 teams in the NFC. So we'll do that coming up here on this edition of Eye on the Enemy. But again, make sure you're checking out everything that I've got going on over at bleedinggreennation.com. I'm still writing for them over there. I've got an article out this week that looks into my NFC power rankings a little bit more in depth. I rank all of the teams in the NFC with a write-up on each, so you should definitely make sure to check that out. And then you're going to want to check out the Eagles Pin Pull Network and tell your family and tell your friends about it during the course of the Eagles season, because we're going to have podcasts coming for you nearly each and every day. So you're going to want to download and subscribe and rate and review the Eagles Pin Pull Network podcast, including this podcast, Eye on the Enemy. Well, joining me here on this first Eye on the Enemy podcast of the 2024 season is the great Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports. He's an old friend of the podcast. If you listen to us over at the other place, you know that by now. And Jeff also has added a lot of Philly stuff to the old toolbox. So we're going to get him on the Hittin' Season podcast that I do at some point here soon. But talking some birds here on Eye on the Enemy. Jeff, welcome back to the show. How are you, pal?
I kind of wish the Phillies were doing better. I know it's a different topic, but you and I have gone back and forth on how bad they've been playing over the last couple of weeks.
They've been playing very, very badly, and you can hear all of our grousing on Hittin' Season. So if you don't subscribe to that podcast, you certainly should. And you should be following Jeff on X in order to see all his Phillies thoughts as well. But Jeff, let's talk about the Eagles here, because it seems as though after training camp, now that it's kind of wrapped up, the vibes are pretty good again. I know at the end of last year, the vibes were not so hot, but it's starting to feel like things are heading in the right direction. Certainly, the Eagles have made a lot of improvements during the course of the offseason on paper, it would appear. And on Thursday, it looks like they made another improvement, getting a wide receiver 3 that it was pretty clear to everybody who'd been paying attention that they desperately needed. They had to get a third veteran, decent wide receiver in here. But I know there's a lot of back and forth on just how good Jahan Dotson is, whether or not the price they gave up for him was too much. So give me your thoughts about the trade and what you think about the player himself. Does he fit with what the Eagles need?
I'm a Penn State guy, so I personally love the Jahan Dotson. I'm probably the worst person to ask this, but it didn't look good in Washington, and I was following that saga really closely over the last couple of weeks. I'm like, really? Omalade, Zacchaeus, Luke McCaffrey are beating this guy out. Like, it doesn't seem that's possible. But then, the last 5 games of last year, Jahan Dotson kind of fell out of favor there. Had 7 catches for 83 yards in that stretch, had a lot of drops. He's had drop issues in the past, but the guy finds a way to get into the end zone, and he's got a lot of speed. And I think what the Eagles plan to do with him is use him in the slot probably a lot more than, say, using A.J. Brown in the slot. I think you're going to see that with motion. You're definitely going to see that with Devonta Smith, but they needed this guy. They needed somebody better than what they had. And this is no disrespect to Britton Covey, who's had a great camp. But Paris Campbell is still coming back from a groin injury. And would he have made this team? I still think he makes this team. But are you really going in the year with Paris Campbell, Britton Covey, Johnny Wilson, who is going to be probably a good depth piece for them, but isn't ready to contribute in the NFL, and Anaya Smith, who's had his struggles in camp? You needed to get somebody. I wasn't sure who it was going to be. I thought they overpaid for Jahan Dotson, but I think it was worth the overpay.
Well, they had an extra third-round pick, so essentially they still have their third-round pick, and the way I read it was because I don't know, it's like spending a 5th-round pick on Dotson this year or something like, but I mean, like, that's essentially what they did. So our 3rd-round pick on Dotson, I guess, this year, which, again, you can question whether or not that's a smart allocation of resources. But given the other options that were out there, I liked the idea. I think the guy I was pining for was Darius Slayton, but I don't know if the Giants were interested in moving him. He'd been rumored to be on the trade market. And there'd been some other guys I'd seen mentioned too, but here's a former 1st-round draft pick and a guy with high upside potential, anyway, who's never played in a good offensive system, who's never played with a good quarterback. So you wonder, I think that's what Howie Roseman and the Eagles are banking on, is in a good offensive system, which I think we all believe this is going to be, where he doesn't have to be one of the top 2 guys. He can slide into more of a niche role here with the Eagles. And he's got a guy in Jalen Hurts who certainly looks like he's ready to bounce back from a subpar 2023 season.
I mean, look, let's be real here. And I know I'm really putting out a take on this. Jalen Hurts is the best quarterback Jahan Dotson has ever played with. And keep in mind, he's played with NFL quarterbacks and Sean Clifford, and he was clearly much more effective when you had an actual guy who was able to get him the football. But Sam Howell just wasn't that guy last year, and he slung it a lot, but you could tell something was off between Dotson and Sam Howell compared to Dotson. And, Washington's been through so many quarterbacks, I forget who his quarterback was in 2020.
Yeah, Tyler Heineke. I mean, Jacoby Brissett last year.
Yeah,
It's been a real hodgepodge.
Now you've got a guy who is going to get him the football. He doesn't have to, as you mentioned earlier, he doesn't have to worry about being the number 2 guy in Washington or in Philadelphia. He's going to be the number 3 guy. He has a role, and he's going to fill that role well. By the way, this move is definitely approved by Saquon Barkley, who has kept tracks on Jahan Dotson ever since Barkley left Penn State in 2017 and Dotson showed up in 2018. These two played against each other in high school. Barkley went to Whitehall, Dotson went to Nazareth. So there's been a connection there. And if you talk to Barkley, he will tell you, like, Jahan Dotson is the truth. So Barkley clearly believes in this guy. He believes in his talent. I think Dotson will fit in well with the culture here. You never heard of any problems of, he was a clubhouse issue or anything like that. It just seemed like he fell out of favor there, which happens. But I didn't think Dotson was going to be a great fit for them this year. By the way, John, doesn't it feel like Washington's got something else cooking if they're willing to trade Jahan Dotson?
You would think. I mean, they want to give their rookie quarterback a little bit, some weapons to throw to. It wouldn't make sense for them to subtract. I know that they were rumored to be in any kind of Brandon Ayuk trade that might come down. They were rumored to be one of the teams most interested in him, although now it sounds like the Steelers, if a trade comes through, would probably be the team to land him. But, you would think, and I think this NFC East, and we're kind of going to get to this as we talk about NFC power rankings here in just a second. The NFC East, I think, is a little bit more wide open than it's been in recent seasons, because I'm not sold on the Cowboys. I'm not sold on the Eagles necessarily. I mean, there's an opportunity here for the Commanders or the Giants to, if they can put a surprise season together, to make a run at the division. And you know, the Commanders have a different coaching staff in place. They've got a promising rookie quarterback who, if he can have a CJ Stroud-like season, okay, now maybe you're talking about something, but he can't really have that if you don't surround him with talent. So they must have just been, and I heard Brian Mitchell talk about this as well, who obviously former Eagle, who's been covering the Redskins for the last 15 years or so here in D.C., very down on Dotson, talking about his attitude and his effort level in practice, and he thinks it's a good move for Washington to get him out of D.C. So maybe they felt he was a net negative, that it's an addition by subtraction situation.
Look, this is why I get mad at fans sometimes, because they're like, well, who cares what Brian Mitchell thinks? I'm like, well, I do, because one, he is a former Eagle, and two, he's a well-respected analyst, as you know, John. You get to listen to him every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only talked to Brian Mitchell a couple times, but you could tell the guy knows his football. So, yeah. So when
he's serious,
someone like Brian Mitchell says that, that's bringing out the red flags for me. I'm like, okay, maybe this isn't going to work out, because he's in the trenches. He's seeing this. So, you know, I'm one of those guys, sometimes I feel like a change of scenery can help, especially in football. I don't think it helps in baseball as much as it does in football. I know we're getting back in the baseball thing here. But, you know, in football, sometimes it's the right fit.
Yeah.
I just don't think this was the right fit in Washington for him. I think Dan Quinn and that coaching staff clearly moved on. Cliff Kingsbury seemed to like – a lot of the players seem to like him. It's just – they like Luke McCaffrey better. For some reason, they like Omalade Sakia. I don't see it, but and again, maybe Omalade wasn't a good fit here last year. So, you know, we'll see. But Jahan Dotson being number 3 receiver, I just think it's a better option than having a guy strictly in the slot who can gain separation. We found out this year in Britton Covey, and Paris Campbell, who's still trying to fight for his career. I mean, there's a chance Paris Campbell does not make the 53-man roster, but he also is a vested veteran, so they could protect him for another 3 weeks.
Well, let's talk about training camp as it's all wrapped up now. And obviously the story of training camp was Jalen Hurts and the training camp that he had. And for all the world, it sounds like he is in a better place physically. And it sounds like he's in a better place emotionally, mentally. I mean, I don't think there was an emotional mental problem last year with him, but I still maintain that the offseason that they had after the Super Bowl, where he was all of a sudden now a superstar athlete, you're inundated with requests, interviews, charity events. There's more being demanded of your time. Your offseason has been shortened by like 3 weeks or a month shorter than you're used to it being, and he has got a contract he's working on. I still believe he did not prepare himself as well as he could, both physically and mentally, for the season last year. And I think it showed as the season went along, both in his interaction in the locker room and in his play on the field. Seems like this offseason, he really was able to hone in on making himself the best he can be. And we'll see how it plays out on the field. But based on what you saw in training camp, does that sound right?
I want to further elaborate on your point from last year, right? John, when's the last time we saw maybe a superstar athlete in this city, a young superstar athlete, kind of become that global phenomenon or in all the commercials, and his pace didn't drop? I want to say it was Donovan, quite honestly. And Donovan didn't have the greatest start to the 2001 season, but he finished off strong. I think Donovan got it, because remember Donovan was in the Chunky Soup commercials and then United Way and then like everything, right? That's how Jalen Hurts felt last year. You know, you saw him in the Hulu stuff. But it was so weird, like, I never felt Jalen Hurts was always the most approachable guy, even though, like, if you said hi to him, he'd say hi back, that type of thing. But last year, it just felt like there was this gated community Jalen Hurts was in, and if you weren't in it, forget it, right? And I think that's changed this year. I really do think Jalen Hurts took a step back and said, what do I need to do to be better? If my teammates think I'm a problem, and I've never really heard any of his teammates actually think he was a problem, but what do I got?
Not a problem, but unapproachable,
exactly.
like
and
you're saying, you know?
Players have opened up to this. I've had some that opened up to me that they said it on the record that they were telling me off the record last year. So I'm kind of glad that came out, and, you know, just him going on golf excursions, or, you know, just inviting everybody down to Orlando to play football with him. I feel like he had the time to do that now. And look, I truly believe this with a guy like Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a guy who loves to be doubted, right? He loves for people to say, this guy is not any good, because that just gives him enough fire to, you know, it's that Michael Jordan thing, right? You're going to find anything you can to make sure you get the best out of yourself. And I feel like he's done that. You know what, John? I wrote about this today. It was the first training camp practice I was at. I had to miss the first 2 practices. The third practice I went to, they were in shells and shorts. Two guys come off the edge for Jalen Hurts. Last year, I think Jalen Hurts would have been touched or whatever. You know what Jalen did? He just calmly went out of the pocket and started sprinting. And he glided past 2 linebackers, I said. Yeah, we're like,
yeah, we didn't see that last year.
That's the Jalen that we all know. And he was quick in his decision-making all of camp. He only threw 1 interception. I don't put too much stock in the whole training camp interception thing, but but you're looking at the process. You're looking at, you know what? I actually have a funny story about that. This is how I respond to when people talk about that. I'm like, as a guy who bowls competitively and as a guy who practices, when I bowl with 300 in practice, and by the way, I've never done it because I'm not working on that sort of thing in my game, it doesn't count.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And just because people are watching you doesn't mean it counts. So, anyway, but I mean, the process is better. He's throwing through the middle of the field more. The motion with the receivers is helping him. It's helping A.J. Brown. It's helping Devonta Smith. Having Saquon Barkley there helps. And look, Vic Fangio's throwing the kitchen sink at this guy. He's not flinching much. So, and I think it's good.
Yeah.
I think it's been a physical training camp. I think it's been a longer training camp, a competitive training camp, and it's helped out everybody on this football team. So if you want to say the vibes are back, John, I would agree with you.
I'm glad to hear that. And I want to talk real quick a couple other things about training camp. Give me one other player outside of Jalen Hurts who you think had the best
question.
camp.
Because I got to write about my camp superstars here. Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple guys I can go here. I thought Quinyon Mitchell had a tremendous camp. Quite honestly, them throwing him into the slot and him not mastering it, but excelling it. And challenging A.J. Brown, challenging Devonta Smith, who's had excellent camps, by the way. I should mention them in there. But Quinyon is not afraid of a challenge.
Yeah.
And the Eagles want him to start opposite Darius Slay at base, but they need a nickel corner because they play nickel 75-80% of the time. So there's where he comes in. I thought Nakobe Dean had a great camp. I thought he had a slow start, but you can tell he's healthy. I think he's going to start next to Devin White week 1. Vic's just not playing this card there yet. Jalen Carter there were 3 or 5 plays every single practice where Jalen Carter was in the backfield doing something, disrupting. I mean, Jalen Carter is going to be a top 5 defensive tackle in this league by the end of the year, if not top 3. I've said that on multiple occasions. I thought Cam Jurgens had a really good camp. If we want to go offensive lineman, you know what?
That's good to hear.
I keep telling people, do not worry about the Jason Kelce drop. I mean, Jason Kelce's a Hall of Famer. There's going to be drop-off, but everybody is a believer in Cam Jurgens. I think Cam Jurgens is a big believer in Cam Jurgens. It's you could tell, you could see why Jason Kelce handpicked Cam Jurgens. And, I thought he's had a really good camp.
Yeah.
I thought Lane Johnson's had a good camp. If you're looking for, the lower tier guy, or I shouldn't say that, the second, third team guy, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., I thought he's had a good camp.
Okay.
This is a guy I thought was just going to be a special teamer year 1. It looks like he's going to get significant snaps here. Moro Jomo's had a great camp. He's played his way into a roster spot and in that defensive tackle rotation. Milton Williams, I'm just naming guys. I thought Kenny Gainwell had a good camp.
Yeah.
I thought Will Shipley had a good camp. It's
Okay.
I mean, I can name guys that have bad camps, but there are a lot of.
That was my next question. So if you want to mention a guy who's had bad camp, that would be great too.
Yeah,
okay.
The Eagles don't cut draft picks, but they might with this one. He's had a strong week of practice, but can it make up for the 3 weeks he's been bad? That's what I want to know, and I don't know. It's now that you add Jahan Dotson to the mix. Do you reserve a roster spot for Anais Smith because you're afraid he's going to get claimed on waivers? I don't know. And he doesn't seem to be a special teams guy. You already have a guy who can strictly play the slot, Britton Covey, but do you want to preserve Covey for the kick and punt returns? Which, by the way, Britton Covey might be the kick returner. They're giving them some shots there. So we'll see. I thought Tyler Steen didn't have a good camp, but he's injured. It was basically once he rolled his ankle, Mekhi Becton, you're right guard. This is what we wanted. It was a fair fight until it wasn't. So So,
right.
I thought John Ross,
Yeah.
I thought he had a shot to make the roster until he had a concussion. Now I don't think he's making the roster. So that's another guy you notice.
Yeah.
CJ Uzuma, obviously he's not here anymore. I didn't think he had a good camp, and it's shown because they already cut the guy. I'm just trying to think of maybe other guys that. What's the guy's name? Matt Hennessy. Yeah, I don't think he had a good camp either. Remember the Eagles signed him in March?
Yeah, and he's supposed to be an important depth pice who can play at a few different positions. That's kind of a big one.
Brett Toast outplayed him. Dylan McMahon's outplayed him. Yeah, this is a guy that, him and Max Sharping, they're the two veterans in here. I don't think they're making this team.
Wow. All right. Well, let's talk about, because we are keeping an eye on the enemy here on this podcast, I want to take a look around the NFC a little bit. And as we're getting ready to start the season, I wanted to get your thoughts on how you think that the big players are here in the NFC, because I think there's a couple of the big teams that have had very poor off seasons. And then there's a couple of teams that are kind of riding a wave of momentum from last year. And then I think you've got the Eagles in the mix as well. I'm going to give you my top 7 that I wrote about for Bleeding Green Nation this week, and then I want you to just give me your top 5. But I want to start with 7 because there's 7 playoff teams, so I'm going to go 7 deep. Now these aren't necessarily I have maybe one of the division winners probably in the back of this top 7, so it's not necessarily the 4 division winners and 3 wild cards. This is in order of who I think the best teams are.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
At BlueNile.com, you can find endless ways to make your moments sparkle. From classic and timeless jewelry gifts to creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams, all at prices you won't find at a traditional jeweler. And right now, you can save up to 40% on fine jewelry and 25% on engagement ring settings during the Blue Nile Anniversary Sale, going on now. Go to BlueNile.com to shop the Blue Nile Anniversary Sale and save up to 40%. That's BlueNile.com.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
So at number 7, I have the Atlanta Falcons. I think they're going to win the NFC South. I think they've had a really interesting and productive offseason. They got a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. I've got the Rams at number 6. I've got the Cowboys down to number 5. I don't think they win the NFC East again this year. Their offseason has been utterly mystifying what Jerry Jones is doing with that team right now, just seemingly not trying. It's really bizarre. I think all in, baby. Yeah, it's a very interesting way of going all in. I think this is going to be the one that's going to be most controversial, that most people would disagree with, but I've got the 49ers dropping to number 4 because I look at what happened at the end of the Super Bowl last year, the way they lost, the offseason they've had with some of the Brandon Ayuk issues and some of just the vibes around the team. I think fans were moaning and complaining about Deebo Samuel and his attitude, and they're just. I think there is definitely going to be some kind of attrition for the 49ers finally getting over the Eagles hump, getting to the Super Bowl, and then losing it the way they did, and then all the turmoil this offseason. I think it reminds me of kind of what the Eagles went through last year. So, I think the 49ers are going to take a step back. I've got them at number 4. I've got the Packers at number 3. I think there's a team that's on the ascent. Jordan Love and Christian Watson. That looks like a really strong duo with Josh Jacobs, the new running back there. I love that team. I think they're on the way up. I've got the Eagles at number 2 because, again, the vibes and Jalen Hurts. If Jalen Hurts is 2022 Jalen Hurts, this is going to be one of the best offenses in football, and I think the defense is going to be better. I've got the Lions at number 1. They just have that feeling of a team that is cresting, They've got great talent. They, unlike the 49ers and Cowboys, are signing all of their young, productive players to make sure that they keep this core intact. They're doing the Howie Roseman style of team building here, which I think is a good model to follow. So that's how I see the NFC right now as we're getting ready to start the regular season. Give me your top 5, Jeff, your top 5 NFC teams, unless you want to go 70.
Deep. I'll start with 5. Number 1, I will agree with you. I think it's Detroit's year. It feels like, and I always like to compare because, I'm an Eagles historian, but I'm an NFL historian. There's always that team where, and I always say it's like the 2002 Eagles, right? Remember going into that year, John, like they lost the NFC Championship game the year before. They kept taking that step up. They had a loaded roster. They had their weaknesses like the Lions do, but you felt it was their year. And they didn't win it all, but you felt like if that's the team you're going to pick to go to the Super Bowl in that conference, I think it's Detroit. They pay Jared Goff. They have David McGarvey. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be better. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a stud. People don't realize it. He's a stud. Jameson Williams becomes anything. They're going to be really good. They already have a great offensive line. They have Sam Laporta at tight end. Like if Jameson Williams becomes anything, their offense rivals the Eagles for the best in football. I truly believe that. Their defense is obviously something that needs to be fixed. But right now, number 2, I think I go San Fran, but I agree with you with all your concerns because they could easily be number 4, number 5, right? I don't like the Brandon Ayuk contract drama that's going on. I think Kyle Shanahan is kind of ignoring it. Deebo Samuel, as you mentioned, he's not really happy. Is Brock Purdy going to be as good as he was last year?
Yeah, I know, right? I'm not making that mistake twice though, because I basically said, hey, why are we putting our pedal down on Brock Purdy? He had 5 games in the regular season and 2 really good playoff games. Like, are we sure he's good? And then he came out and had like an MVP caliber season. So I'm done bagging on Brock Purdy, but your point is well taken.
In the world, because I had no problem with him saying what he said. Well, if our quarterback were healthy, or, and again, that's the 49ers' fault, but if our quarterback were healthy, that's a better game.
Right.
Well, he backed that up, in week 13. Yeah. So I'm like, you know what? Kudos to you. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you walked the walk, because people don't do that anymore. They just, it's like the Tyreek Hill, Noah Lyles thing. I'm the fastest guy. Well, go out there and actually prove it. It's like, I'm sick and tired of hearing Tyreek Hill saying he could beat anybody in a race. Go out there and do it. I don't know what to tell you, but I digress. I think the Eagles are 3. And I think that's fair right now.
Okay.
Again, we have to see how this offense clips. We have to see this defense. I think this defense needs to be top 15 for them to compete for a Super Bowl. I think they can do that, but if they're top 10, John, that gets elevated. So I don't think they're going to be top 10. I still am concerned about their linebackers, and I'm concerned about the pass rush a little bit. Not the interior guys. I'm concerned about Bryce Huff.
No, the edge rushers.
That's not right. I feel a lot better about this football team right now, but they don't. And as we're seeing, that's probably a good thing that they're not dealing with this. So, exactly. So
they made the right decision.
It is what it is. But, number 4, if we're going divisions, the Falcons are going to win the NFC South. So I guess we'll go them. And I like Tampa Bay, but I think Tampa Bay is an older team. I think the Falcons had a tremendous 3 weeks. Locking down A.J. Terrell. They signed Kirk Cousins this offseason. They traded for Matt Judon, who, again, by the way, how much did you love Matt Judon's comment saying, I didn't earn a contract? You don't hear
that was
That's
solid.
Leadership right there. And I think people are going to gravitate toward that. By the way, they still have some solid players on defense. Like Jesse Bates was a stud for them last year. That was another great sign. It feels like it took them a while, but they're building this thing back up. Look for Bijan Robinson to have a massive season, by the way. So, those are my. I guess you could say they're my division winners, right? So if we go to the other 3 here, I think Green Bay makes the playoffs. I think Green Bay's going to be like that 11-win team that probably doesn't win the division, but they're going to make the playoffs and they're going to be at the right. So I've got to go Green Bay in there. I love Jordan Love. I think it's kind of ridiculous he got paid after 8 games, but that's the market now. It is what it is. Even before those 8 games, you could tell the kid was pretty good. So I'm not going to slight Jordan Love for that. It's definitely sitting on the bench for 3 years is worth. I will go Dallas at 6. I'd still say Dallas is good enough to make the playoffs, but I agree with you. What are they doing over there?
I mean, they don't believe in anybody they have there to really invest in anything.
Also, the Packers kind of told them maybe we're not as good as we say we are.
Yes.
Yeah. And
yes,
you know what?
I think so. I think it told them everything you needed to know.
Back. But who are you gonna?
No,
Dak's gonna get his money. It's just who's he gonna get it from? And maybe.
Well, they got to bottom out in order to kind of get in a position to draft somebody decent. That's really what's got to happen. But I don't know that Dallas is willing to do that.
It's Dallas, and they like creating the headline. Look, CeeDee Lamb should have a contract right now. Michael Parsons should have a contract. I would have said, look, you guys are going to be the faces of our franchise, offense and defense. I don't really care about number 4. Number 4 is going to have to win in the postseason to get a contract. And that's more than fair.
Yeah.
By the way, how about their big all-season acquisition being Ezekiel Elliott? He was the worst running back in football when he left.
Right, and now he's your number 1. He's really their running threat. I mean, it's going to be a tremendously one-dimensional offense. I mean, they could really take a big step back.
I love their
this year.
draft, too. I love the Cooper Beebe pick. I love the Tyler Guyton pick. I think they're going to be good players for them. But I think a lot of people, in Dallas are really downplaying how bad this could be. I think they know, but they don't want to. It's kind of like that.
I don't think the fans are. I think the Dallas fans know that this could be a disaster.
Trying to talk them out of that, if that makes sense. And it's not. Yeah. It's weird that every year you think Dallas is going to be a Super Bowl contender because of that talent, and I say no, you can't be a Super Bowl contender until you make a conference championship game. That's just a fact of life. You take the good, you take the bad. I think I'm putting 80s references in here, but it's
a fact of life world we're living in, Jeff.
7. Oh man, this is the tough one because
the last team in. Who's the last team in? Essentially,
I mean, I don't think Washington's in that spot yet. I like what they're doing. I love the Jaden Daniels pick. Between him and C.J. Stroud last year, I feel like I'm on a roll with certain quarterbacks. I don't consider myself quarterback guru. I just like when it's the eye test, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. In the North, could we potentially see the Bears?
I had the Bears relatively. I had them on the outside looking in.
There's a lot of those
in my
teams,
picks,
right? Seattle's on that list. I think the Cardinals are going to surprise some people this year. You know what? I'll tell you what team I'm going to go with. This is going to be my bold prediction. The NFC South gets 2 teams in the playoffs, and I think Tampa Bay is that team.
Well, they won a playoff game last year. You know what I mean? So that's that's right. So they returned. They're running it back essentially. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's probably actually a pretty wise selection there. So I get that pick.
Players in Tampa Bay, and I send them all through text 2 nights before the game. I said, just came out of the Eagles locker room. If you guys don't win by 15, I'm going to be highly disappointed. I think they won by 15, but it felt like a lot more than that.
No, it was more. It was 38-9 or 31-9 they won by.
You knew it was coming, right? Once the Jalen whole safety or whatever it was, the turnover deep in his end zone, I'm just like, all right, that's it.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. You knew they were going to turtle up from that point on. So no, I think that's a good look at the NFC. I mean, we'll see how things shake out, but there are some. It's kind of. I really do think there's two of the old standards that I think are going to take a step back this year. I think you've got 2 surging teams in the North. And NFC North might be the best division in football if you're looking at it, because the Bears could be much improved, and I kind of like JJ McCarthy with the Vikings a little bit there until the injury. So I think the Vikings are going to kind of have a tough time now, but that's a very, very tough division. And then you've got teams like the Eagles, who are kind of an enigma still at this point. I think we've got some good hopes, some good vibes on them, but it really could go one of 2 directions. It's not a lock that the Eagles are back to being one of the top teams in the NFC. Yeah. So if they get off to a slow start, it could be ugly.
Not mention that could be a top 4 team in the West. I mean, in the NFC, the Rams.
They were the team that I had at number 7. I had them at 6 because I had the Falcons at 7. I had the Rams at 6.
I went division chance and then went from there. But again, Matthew Stafford, if he's healthy, they're really good. Kyler Williams, if he's healthy. Cooper Kupp, if he's healthy. I like their defense. It's just, I should bank on Sean McVay a lot more than I am. Let's just put that, because I love Sean McVay as a head coach.
Well, we had a lot of Doug Peterson versus Sean McVay stuff going on when Doug was here, because Doug was always underrated in terms of McVay. Everybody loved him. So I think we have a little bit of Sean McVay bias in Philadelphia because of how he was always put ahead of Doug Peterson, despite
John,
not having the
do
record.
You ever get that back when you're judging coaches? I kind of always say this with Andy Reid. This is before he won his first Super Bowl. These coaches that go deep in the playoffs a lot, and I'm bringing up Kyle Shanahan because of this, and Sean McVay was the guy before this. Don't you feel like Kyle Shanahan is going to win a Super Bowl at some point in his career?
Yeah, I think so. It used to be that if you didn't win it in your first 5 seasons as a head coach, you were never going to win. But Bill Cowher, I think, was the first to do it, to win it as late in his career as he did, and now Andy Reid did it, and it's starting to become more of a thing that doesn't really hold water. But that was a big thing. If you didn't win a Super Bowl in your first 5 years as a head coach, or 4 years, I forget what the number was, then you weren't going to win.
Mark Schottenheimer was the prime example. Him and Chuck Knox, those two won all the time, but they just couldn't win a Super Bowl. Yeah,
just couldn't win at all. Yeah. It's not easy winning Super Bowls here, Jeff, as we well know. Only one Super Bowl championship, although we've been to 3 of those games in relatively not short order. I guess 2004 is now a really long time ago.
It's funny, you and I come from the generation where when we were growing up, the Eagles were not good. And I
no, they were terrible. They're terrible every year.
2015 is the worst year. I'm you guys have no clue, man. No clue.
You have no idea.
I said, go on YouTube, watch the 98 Eagles as a kid, and tell me that was fun, because it definitely wasn't.
Yep. No. Check out. I'm sorry, going way back. Check out some of the records from the 60s and 70s. Check out the early. Yeah, and the early 80s were a rough scene. So no, there have been some barren wastelands with this Eagles team. We're very lucky to have the team that we have here in Philadelphia. So folks, make sure you're checking out everything Jeff's got going on over at CBS Sports. Jeff, what's your X handle, buddy?
Jeff Kerr CBS. But I always still call it Twitter or the Bird app. I don't know why.
I know the Bird app, X, Twitter, whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah, but Jeff's got great stuff going on there with the Eagles and with the Phillies. And again, we're going to have him on the Hit and Season podcast at some point here soon, too. So we'll have you check that out. But Jeff, thanks for joining me here on this edition of Eye on the Enemy, buddy. Thanks. I really appreciate it. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this edition of Eye on the Enemy. Just again, a reminder, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Follow the show if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whatever it is. Follow this podcast and leave a rating and a review for Eye on the Enemy. Would love to hear what you're looking for, what you'd like to hear this year on the podcast. And of course, make sure if you follow the Eagles Pinpool Network and subscribe and all that, you'll get all of our podcasts all season long. We got a lot coming up for you here in 2024. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time right here on Eye on the Enemy.